again for being here today. Before starting, just a couple of technical information again. For those people who have registered for the conference dinner, please, during coffee break or lunch break, please go to the registration room. You will be given it's a sort of voucher, homemade voucher. But this is important because in this way, the waiters will know who is having a vegetarian menu, who has allergies, etc. Because they're written there, everything. So tonight, at the restaurant, you'll put this sort of voucher just in front of the dish or the plate where you are, where you decide to sit. And I remind you again that tonight, for those people who didn't have a chance to be at the guided tour, there is another guided tour tonight at 6. Conference dinner will be at 8 at the Circolino, which is a restaurant in Città Alta. And the girls of the students from the registration room will be outside the venue to help you with the road. They're coming to the conference dinner as well, so you just follow them. And then, yes, as you can see, just outside, just near the main entrance, there are some boxes with FFP2 masks. If you need them, just take one, and that's it. So, good morning, officially. And now we have the pleasure of having Massimiliano Demata as our third plenary speaker. Massimiliano is Associate Professor of English at the University of Turin. He was a Fulbright Scholar in Yale in 1999 and Indiana University 2014, and has held visiting professorships at Saarland University, Sciences Po Lyon, and OTH Regensburg. He is the co-editor of the Journal of Language and Discrimination and has published on populist discourse, Trump's rhetoric, metaphors of the nation, and social media discourse quite consistently. Today, Max is presenting a talk, a plenary talk entitled, I'm just reading because I don't remember the title, very long, Conspiracy Theories as Counter-Narratives in the Public Sphere, Theoretical Challenges for Critical Discourse Analysis. So, Massimiliano, the floor is yours. And
thank you very much, and good morning. I hope everybody can hear me, and that everybody at home can hear me too. Well, first of all, it's not really out of rhetoric. I would really like to thank Stefania, Mark, and the organizers for providing us with this academic heaven, really. And it's really a blessing to be here, and it's a blessing to be in this location particularly. Now, let me begin by giving you a personal anecdote, which is somehow important. I found it important in the light of the issues that I'm going to talk about today, about the status of conspiracy theories as discourse or in discourse, as we will see, and about the challenges that I believe that we as critical discourse scholars face. The anecdote is about two former students of mine from a few years ago. I'm on Facebook, unfortunately, like many of us. So I happened to stumble on updates of my contacts. And during the first lockdown, it was about April 2020, so these former students of mine were talking about the origins of the virus and the possible vaccines. And so they refused the official narrative, so arguing instead that Bill Gates probably invented COVID so that he could sell his vaccines, and then implanting a microchip so that he could control us through 5G and so on and so forth. And then they started posting very violent stuff from QAnon and some other weird conspiracy. And then I finally decided to speak to them. Of course, you know, one has to respect other people's opinions. So I asked them, look, are you sure about what you are talking about? So these claims are false, or at least implausible, or cannot be verified. You know. And they both actually told me in different moments, but look, Professor Demata, but you taught us to be critical towards truth. You taught us to be critical about the truth of official discourses and official narratives. So you taught us to question the official narratives. So you taught us to have doubts and be skeptical. You taught us to entertain doubts and to put in question official hegemonic discourses. So you taught us about the language and social change. So why are you complaining to us about that? So we are doing just that. So then I asked myself, have I created some kind of monster? So have I done anything wrong by teaching critical discourse analysis to 18 or 19-year-old students? So I must add that these two students were like the exception rather than the rule, luckily. So as far as I know, most of my past and current students are not anti-vaxxers or COVID deniers. So this is reassuring to a certain extent. So, but still, I ask myself a few questions about that. So as researchers and analysts of contemporary social reality and discourse, most of us dismiss, often unproblematically, conspiracy theories as false. And of course, some of them are indeed quite dangerous. But dismissing them just like this is, I believe, wrong. Conspiracies are indeed an influential social and political phenomenon. They have existed for a long time. So they influence people's lives in more than one way, and often indeed the wrong way. So why shouldn't we study them? So why shouldn't we study the way they challenge, rightly or wrongly, and often deceivingly and starting from false premises, the social order, or indeed violate or pose grave dangers to democracy in ways that can foster dangerous ideologies such as indeed racism. So why shouldn't we locate them as or within discourse that is as an important set of narratives that reflect and influence to some degree society and its power structures? So my answer, of course, is that we should. So we definitely should, and I hope to prove why. I hope to give a few hints for reflection for the reasons why I think we should. In fact, my former students also made me think about our own critical approach to discourse. So in my lecture today, I would like to talk about conspiracy in discourse and as discourse, and about their status in discourse studies. And I will also use this topic to offer a few reflections on how conspiracy theories work vis-a-vis critical discourse studies. So I will first talk about definitions of conspiracy theories, some of which are probably quite well known, as well as the big gap. What I found is a big gap in discourse studies addressing conspiracy theories. I will then discuss definitions of conspiracy theories and those aspects of conspiracy theories which I think are central in our understanding of them through the lens of critical discourse studies. And then I will make finally some claims about how we should locate conspiracies as discourse and why they should be the object of study or critical discourse studies. I hope to give some kind of food for thought, among other things, and I will probably raise more questions and doubts than give definite answers, as it is often the case. But anyway, here we go. So first of all, conspiracy theories have been researched very thoroughly in the context of several disciplines. Writing in 2011, Jovan Byford, a major scholar of conspiracy theories, argued that communities of historians, political scientists, psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists, and philosophers, as well as journalists, commentators, and political pundits, have sought to explain the enduring appeal of the conspiracy culture. Anyone missing from the list, this list? So yes, we are missing, of course. So conspiracies have been indeed the focus of some international interdisciplinary research projects. The most successful one is COMPACT, Comparative Analysis of Conspiracy Theories in Europe. The group started in 2015 and is a network of 150 researchers studying conspiracy theories, and it was funded by a cost action. So scholars from many disciplines are involved in these projects, whose primary aim is to promote partnerships and synergies in order to bridge the great divide, as it has been called, between different disciplines and methodologies. The website of COMPACT currently hosts a bibliography of criticism on conspiracy theories with almost 2,000 titles. 2,000 titles. Maybe out of these 2,000, 3 or 4 address directly conspiracy theories from the point of view of linguistics of discourse. There are a few things by Steve Oswald, a few other things, but really, really very few. And in fact, the most important editorial output of Compact is the Routledge Handbook on Conspiracy Theories, edited by Michael Butter and Peter Knight. So clearly there is a little book industry, okay, about conspiracies, both academic and non-academic. And there are indeed many books, both by scholars and journalists written on them. But there is a noticeable gap in conspiracy studies. It is that gap that I have tried to fill with a 20-chapter volume, Conspiracy Theory Discourse, which I've co-edited with Angela Zottola, who is here, and Virginia Zorzi, so I hope you will allow me a little bit of self-promotion. And I'm glad to see that 2 of the contributors of this volume, John Richardson and Paola Catenaccio, are with us today, I think. So watch this space because it should be published before the end of the year. So what are conspiracy theories? So of course it's not easy to trace common elements between conspiracy theories. So from flat Earth to the fake landing on the moon, from Pizzagate to the reptilians, from truthers to birthers, from the Great Replacement to the pandemic devised by Bill Gates. From the protocols of the Elders of Zion to the new forms of anti-Semitism with anti-Sorosism. So conspiracies are a very disparate set. But one thing is shared by them all. They all question accepted narratives coming from epistemological authorities. I'll go back to this concept later, and propose alternative narratives. So there is no order of sense in any conspiracy theories. We call them, and they are, to a great extent, false, fictitious, fragmentary, non-linear, nonsensical, so that they are non sequiturs, they're implausible, incoherent, illogical, and irrational, right? And of course, when I say irrational and false, I'm kind of mimicking the negative judgment that is usually given to conspiracy theories. So I'm using categories which reflect the primacy that we usually and indeed rightly give to scientific discourse. So we brand conspiracy theories as something dissonant and different, okay, and unlike reason and truth. But let's move along with that for the time being. Of course, we love making fun of conspiracy theories, okay? So there's also a kind of sub-industry, so to speak, which makes fun of the conspiracy theories. So we say that their followers are weirdos, they are stupid, they believe in lies and falsities, and so on. So, and I'm pretty sure that each of us has at least a friend, a relative, or an acquaintance who believes, or a former friend perhaps, who believes in one or more conspiracy. And in fact, it has been studied that at least once in our lifetime, in the lifetime of each of us, we have believed in at least one conspiracy theory. Okay. There is, of course, a dark side to it. So conspiracy theories can be very violent and dangerous. So they can have a very practical and dramatic consequences. And of course, this is only one very famous recent example of how dangerous they can be when theory becomes practice, unfortunately. So let's not downplay their social influence, which is visibly increasing, okay? Well, in fact, conspiracy theories, first of all, are essentially social constructs, okay? So conspiracies start from and address society and aim at questioning it. So they aim at changing people's lives. They offer a key or a grid of interpretation of reality, and they can have a very real and practical realizations, and as we saw, unfortunately, quite violent at times. So conspiracy theories are, quote, attempts to explain the ultimate causes of significant social and political events and circumstances with claims or secret plots by 2 or more powerful actors. So official explanations of certain facts or events are not accepted, and alternative explanations are proposed. So conspiracy theorists basically do not accept the official version of certain facts or events. They propose alternative explanations of what happened, claiming at the same time that the truth, this is one of the keywords of today's, of my talk today, they claim at the same time that the truth behind certain events has been manipulated or hidden by institutions, media, science, even academia, in fact, or the mainstream, as they call it. So conspiracies, in a way, join the dots of unrelated events and offer an apparently linear explanation of otherwise unconnected events or facts. Indeed, conspiracy theories are unfalsifiable or non-falsifiable. So for those who believe in conspiracy theories, they are absolutely true. So there is no alternative rational explanation possible. If there is an explanation, it is an explanation which is part of the theory. Okay, so if there is evidence, that evidence is always fabricated by the mainstream or by the elite. So conspiracy theories, in fact, are unproven stories told as truth, as they are built in opposition, as we said before, to those stories created, told, and supported by the epistemological authorities. They are affected by crippled epistemology, as conspiracy theories rely on partial or unverified sources of information. They're also called bad science, a pathology, a disease of the mind that affects certain individuals whose actions may potentially be harmful to other individuals and society itself. In fact, the idea of conspiracy theory as a pathology or even madness is something that is quite recurrent in the way conspiracies are represented as indeed outside the perimeter of rationality, facts, and truth. In fact, Richard Hofstadter, one of the earliest scholars to address conspiracies, talked about the paranoid style of politics in the USA, which characterized the conspiracies popular among right-wing fringe groups in the 1950s. So how should we consider conspiracy theories in comparison to our supposedly normal world, so to speak? So I'm going to use this next image to visualize them. So please, as a caution, this is an analogy. Okay, so this is not an explanation, but it's an analogy. So we can consider conspiracy theories as a sort of a world upside down, okay, of legitimate or real reality in the discourse. So just like Stranger Things that probably most of you have been watching. So a world which is the same and the opposite somehow of standard or official discourses and has its own rules and laws. So conspiracy theories are like an alternative reality, which is indeed cast aside from and by official narratives as spurious, nonsensical, and false, but which every now and then, just like the upside down of Stranger Things, rear their ugly head into our real world. In fact, January the 6th, with the assault on Capitol Hill, is perhaps one of those moments in which, just like the upside down broke into the world of Hawkins, Indiana in Stranger Things, the Stop the Steal conspiracy broke into the real world and nearly indeed broke it into pieces. So in many respects, however, it is also us who have located the conspiracies in the upside down. The term itself, in fact, the conspiracy theory, is loaded with negative connotations nowadays. There is, in fact, a meta-pragmatic nature of the label conspiracy theory, which is used to attack a priori certain arguments. But conspiracy theories, in fact, also present themselves as marginalized. And conspiracy theorists are also proud of their marginal status. They live to be marginal. They even mimic marginality, to paraphrase Homi Bhabha. And the core aspect, in fact, of conspiracy theory is the fact that their proponents and supporters refute the knowledge contained in narratives proposed by the so-called epistemological authorities. So those institutions of society, such as government, scientists, academia, media, who are in charge of making unbiased claims on the basis of available data and facts, and of contributing to the spread of knowledge, to spreading knowledge of all kinds. I mean, what is at stake ultimately is the control of the truth. So that's the real playing field. So truth is no longer, and I use it with inverted commas, of course, is no longer considered to be a monopoly of the official institutions of the establishment, be it political, scientific, or academic establishment. Conspiracy theories are certainly not new. They predate the age of internet and social media. However, indeed, it is a truth universally acknowledged that in recent times, conspiracies are on the rise. And this is partly due, indeed, to the popularity of social media. So the environment of conspiracy theories is one characterized by infodemic and disinformation, fake news, etc. Now, not going to get into a full discussion of these terms, I'm only going to say that these terms are often used in conjunction with conspiracy theories as they all deal with manufactured and or manipulated information. And indeed, the post-truth paradigm, so whereby emotion is claiming its primacy and truth is in retreat, thrives indeed in social media. In fact, in social media themselves, it is increasingly difficult to distinguish between reputable sources and fake sources, or between indeed facts and opinions. So with no fact-checking and no gatekeeping, the user-generated and intersubjective contents of social media can easily be created and manipulated by conspiracy theorists. This fact has certainly increased the number of people who follow conspiracy theories and has made the networking among them particularly easy and fast. Needless to say, there is a stronger political dimension, of course, of conspiracy theories. In fact, nowadays, conspiracies often flourish thanks to populist political actors. In fact, in this sense, just like populism, in fact, conspiracies construct themselves as counter-narratives questioning the hegemony of dominant narratives as marginal but right and true, and as the voice of the oppressed and indeed the true people. So conspiracies and disinformation in general have been particularly influential in certain political junctures, for example, in 2016 with the Brexit referendum, of course, and the election of Donald Trump as president of the United States. The information, as we all know, leading to the events in the USA and the UK of 2016 was quite economical with the truth, shall we say. So faith in science and experts was attacked. Probably no politician, say 30 years ago, would have had the nerve of saying, I think the people of this country have had enough of experts, as Michael Gove did in 2016. So with Trump, indeed, conspiracies have risen to the highest office in the country. So we have experienced what has been called presidential conspiracism. And in fact, Trump relied heavily on conspiracy theories, retweeting their baseless claims, and often, of course, siding with conspiracy groups such as QAnon in making the most extravagant and often dangerous false claims on COVID-19 and the outcome of the 2020 presidential elections. Now, I would like to make a number of interconnected claims about conspiracy theories. Well, my first claim is that conspiracy should be studied as discourse, or indeed within discourse. Should we, in fact, talk about conspiracy as discourse, so as a kind of discrete entity in the traditional Foucauldian sense of the word, or should we talk about conspiracy in discourse? Conspiracies are indeed discursive, so they are indeed, for one thing, they are language in use, and they do have many of the features that are usually attributed to discourse. They do participate in the power struggle of society, for example, but do they constitute an independent discursive structure in themselves, like, for example, the discourse of law or the discourse of environment? Or should we rather speak of conspiracies as an epistemological and communicative strategy applied to and inside the discourse as a method to displace and dismantle official discourses? Or, even better, are they rather a negative, reverse, mirror-like image of official discourses? So a counter-discourse of sorts, using, to put it with Halliday, an anti-language addressing the same issues as discourses, playing on the same field, but with a different set of rules. Don't they oppose, in fact, a consolidated discourse, just like, for example, alternative medicine? So are they rather the other half, the marginalized, the victimized, or even the carnivalesque, in some cases, to use Bakhtin's words, part of larger standard discourse systems with their own specular but opposite counter-language, just like the upside down of Stranger Things? In fact, discourse is material, in effect, just to go back to Foucault once again, as it produces practices that systematically form the objects of which they speak. A discourse, of course, is social practice. It creates an epistemic reality and becomes a technique of control and discipline. And it does so by fixing the meaning of text and predetermining the categories of reason by which statements are accepted as knowledge. So that which does not conform to the enunciated truth of discourse is rendered deviant, that is outside the discourse and outside the society, sociality, or the sociable. This is what we do with conspiracy theories, in fact, and this is what conspiracy theories do with us, in fact. Okay, so we delegitimize each other, so to speak. Okay, so a critical approach to the study of society and discourse, of course, implies its understanding in its historical specificity. And that, of course, must include the study of language as a social practice that is determined by social structures and that at the same time contributes to stabilizing and changing or aiming at changing that structure. So in that sense, conspiracies pose and project themselves as a marginal other. So an other discourse which tries to destabilize the accepted meanings which are based on certain hierarchies of power within society. So if power relations within society are expressed through discourse and language, and if discursive practices are socially controlled, then the narratives of conspiracy theories themselves constitute an alternative form of discourse to those normative discourses which are legitimized by epistemological authorities. So conspiracy theories in this sense pose as counter discourses, so competing for hegemony in society with official discourses, and in fact, as we have seen with Trump, occasionally becoming official discourses themselves. So they challenge the hegemony of dominant ideology in discourses by presenting their narratives as the expression of marginal or oppressed groups who struggle for legitimacy, as they claim to express an allegedly true explanation of social and political events in opposition to the official version. Okay, so conspiracies are indeed about power and hegemony, and specifically social and political power. So what seems to be quite evident on the surface, at least, is that conspiracies present themselves as having a critical attitude towards power and the institutions which supposedly control society because of their power. So, of course, we are all involved, we all study the relationship between discourse and power, and in fact, discourses are produced by the effects of power within a social order, and this power in turn sets the rules which define the criteria for legitimizing knowledge and truth inscribed into discourse. So, and within the narratives proposed by conspiracy theories, both social structures and meanings are disputed. So we might view this polarization between conspiracy narratives and the mainstream narratives in terms of the notion of a discursive struggle. Of course, this is a concept that was first introduced by Laclau and Mouffe in Hegemony and Socialist Strategy, and later developed by Fairclough, Waddock, and others. So within discursive struggle, a plurality of discourses vies for social, political, and ontological hegemony. So as social reality is constructed in discourse, meanings are never fixed because they are contested between different groups or interests. So the discursive construction of the antagonism between different positions takes place in a delimited political space. So the political space of opposition groups, such as conspiracists, takes its impetus from the sector practices that constitute the hegemonic space. So it shares that discursive space and moves away from it at the same time in a continuous dialectic struggle. So this discursive struggle, or indeed knowledge contestation, as has been called by Harambam, takes place between different discursive practices, with each practice, as we said before, legitimizing itself and delegitimizing the other. So each practice basically othering the other. So conspiracy theories are a perfect example of this in that they deliberately construct themselves in opposition to the political, cultural, and scientific establishment by proposing alternative interpretations of social realities, while the epistemological authorities in turn posit conspiracy theories as a dangerous other. And in fact, there is no doubt that conspiracies work in a contested cultural and social territory. So those who feel marginalized in society for whatever reason, right or wrong, so very often embrace conspiracy theories to fight against the supposed injustice affecting them and to find the truth which is hidden or manipulated by the mainstream. So this is their mimicry of marginality, which is often, of course, a tactical mimicry of marginality. So followers and proponents of conspiracy theories present themselves indeed as oppressed and marginal subject. And as I said, of course, this is partly tactical, this is partly genuine and authentic, as followers of conspiracy theories do genuinely believe in them and feel in the position of oppressed subject. Now, my second claim now is a consequence of the first, and particularly from the notion that conspiracies posit themselves against epistemological authorities. The contestation of the nature of truth and knowledge is the basis of conspiracies. So, in fact, we can say that all conspiracies are about truth and about contested or alternative truths. As I said a minute ago, so conspiracy theories relish on knowledge contestation, whereby they pit themselves against official science in a context of epistemological insecurity or epistemic instability. So when, particularly at times when uncertainty about society and science both turns into and is fed by power struggles in, over, and of discourse. The other entry point to conspiracies in this sense, in this context, is Batia's concept of discursive illusion. So discursive illusion is subjectivity turned into objectivity. It is objectification through social hegemony. It is naturalization of subjective representations into social consciousness. It doesn't matter within the concept of discursive illusion, it doesn't matter really if something is true or false, but through illusion, certain linguistic resources are used to acquire the status of facticity. And in fact, the concept of discourse illusions applies particularly well in contested representations of reality. So different groups, different interests, different ideologies clash with each other to gain dominance and hegemony. And they do so in certain crucial fields of social reality. So truth is really a crucial point in the way we should consider conspiracies. In fact, conspiracies, as I said before, are generally accused of being false, to the point that, as I said earlier, the term conspiracy theories means somebody who believes in fictions, basically. And in fact, debunking conspiracy fantasies is quite a popular exercise, and conspiracies, of course, as we saw earlier, are often the object of ridicule. And in fact, the debunkers identify conspiracy theories as false in the name of their beliefs in the supremacy of reason and truth, as it should be done. However, reducing conspiracies to their definition and evaluation along the true-false line is just reductive in terms of our understanding of their social influence and impact. Okay, I'm going to get to the conclusions, which are actually quite extensive conclusions, so it's not like the final slide or something like that. So now, conspiracies construct rather than reflect their object. This is what discourses do. This is what discourse does. And in fact, the relationship between non-conspiratorial discourse and its object may be healthier, if we want to use a health metaphor again, than that of conspiracies. However, conspiracies are constructed and pose as elements of social critique. They pose as true, and as such, we cannot overlook them. So no matter how shaky and often even disgusting they are in terms of their empirical foundations, conspiracies are very appealing to many people and are a challenge, and often a dangerous one, to social structures. In fact, conspiracy theories touch on the order of discourse and on the social order. They question hierarchies and hegemonies. And it is not just a matter of identifying conspiracies as foundational in the context of our post-truth world, which of course they are anyway. Instead, rather than focusing exclusively on the social, psychological, or political motivations behind conspiracies, or simply accusing them of being bad science or paranoid or false, we must address conspiracy theories from a discourse perspective by looking at how they construct their alternative view of social reality in discourse. So as critical scholars, we should look at how conspiracies create a breach into the social space by feeding into and being fed by alternative semiotic systems, by attempting to deconstruct the power dynamics behind such systems. So I think that conspiracies can actually provide us with a double opportunity. So the first opportunity is quite obvious. So conspiracies provide us with an area of research that has been largely overlooked, as I mentioned earlier, by critical discourse studies, with a few notable exceptions. And in fact, again, little self-advertising, our volume on conspiracy theory discourses, with that volume, we will be trying to fill some of those gaps. Conspiracies impinge on discourse and power relations, and that's because they are influenced by and influence social structures. So conspiracies are built in society. So they try to undermine the power relations at the basis of official narratives by proposing counter-narratives, eroding the basis of commonly accepted truths, and in turn aiming at conquering social and cultural hegemony. At the same time, conspiracies can also give us some impetus on our nature as analysts, as we delve into the way discourse is negotiated within and by society. So in our critique of discourse, now I'm not sure this is our job, but how do we defend the truth against the pack of lies of conspiracy theories? Some of them are very dangerous indeed. Should we revise or fine-tune the kind of intellectual and critical mechanisms through which we operate our critique of discourse? Let's not forget that modern critical discourse theory started from a hermeneutics of suspicion, which was a very healthy entry point and approach to questioning the official truth or the universally acknowledged truths of discourse systems. Truth, indeed, is knowledge entangled with power, and knowledge is not true as such. Rather, it is, of course, a discourse and its practices that make it true. And as such, it should be questioned and problematized by us. Paradoxically, so if reasoning by suspicion is part of our approach to discourse, so is the way conspiracies approach official discourses. So conspiracies indeed start as epistemologies of suspicion, challenging our trust in official discourses. So they want to uncover and bring to light the way certain interests are disguised by, for instance, official science. So I'm tempted to say, don't we do the same? So finally, we go back to my personal anecdote. So with my students posting horrible stuff from QAnon and about Bill Gates, whom perhaps almost nobody here is particularly fond of anyway. But so my former students have proved once again that conspiracy culture and thinking are problematic in the current political discourse and communication paradigm. Of course, we don't need my former students to teach us this truth, so we already know that. So without stretching it too far, it seems as if the discursive mechanisms that are typical of conspiracy theories reproduce those of the pioneering theorists of discourse studies. And this is something that there's quite a large literature about that, about similarities between these two sets of thought, these two systems of thought. In fact, several observers have noticed an uncanny resemblance between those alternative narratives, and some of them are indeed conspiracy theories, and the rejection of modernity and the Enlightenment, which is typical of postmodern thought. And in fact, quite a lot has been made of a supposed influence of postmodernism on the alt-right. So I will not go into that because I think there is some fallacy in that argument, but still, take for example, Mike Chernovich, a notorious alt-right troll and conspiracy theorist and regular guest in Alex Jones' show, and author of several books, including Hoaxed, Everything They Told You Is a Lie. So Chernovich told the New Yorker in 2016, look, I read a postmodernist theory in college. If everything is a narrative, then we need alternatives to the dominant narrative. I don't seem a guy who reads Lacan, do I? Well, I'm not sure Chernovich has read Lacan. So certainly Trump has not read Baudrillard or Foucault. I'm pretty sure he hasn't. But this is really kind of a pocket postmodernity. I mean, it's not really, we should not take these statements too seriously. But yet, the risk of misunderstanding the postmodern critique of absolute truth or truth as a social construct and the alternative realities proposed by conspiracy theories does exist. So the demand for recognition for the supposedly oppressed and marginal people who are the main actors of conspiracies, for example, the supposedly endangered the white majority of the great replacement theory, should be taken seriously as long as we recognize that they mimic that marginalization, which is so appealing to many, and dangerously so. So truth indeed seems to be the battlefield, but the battlefield really of what happens with conspiracy theories. But what really runs the risk of getting lost in the process is a healthy critical approach to the social dynamics behind this struggle. So it's not just lies and fiction. So conspiracy theories, in that sense, I think should be taken seriously and as a serious challenge to society and culture. So in a way, let's not forget our old rule book and how indeed we should somehow handle the truth. So as Hannah Arendt said in The Origins of Totalitarianism, the ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist. You probably already you all know this passage, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, i.e. the reality of experience, and the distinction between true and false, i.e. the standards of thought, no longer exist. I mean, lying has always been appealing. I mean, falsity has always been appealing. I mean, Satan was a brilliant character, the most brilliant character of Paradise Lost, of course. So we need to take conspiracy theories seriously because of their dangerous appeal and of the challenges that they pose to us. So now, let's go out and deal with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Massimiliano, for this inspiring talk. And well, I see a lot of raised hands, so please.
Yep. Well, yes, this is a question that I've been asked for many years, but not just in the context of conspiracy theories. And this is a question that probably all of us have been asked for several reasons. So how we contribute to that? Well, of course, I mean, you know, we like being academic. We like to be in academia, but we like to think that we are influential, and we are to a certain extent. So I don't have a like a definite answer to that, but certainly. Well, we need to work on that. I mean, we have a very important task to fulfill, which is education. There are many ways to pursue that. Let's not ever forget, of course, that yes, there are hundreds of us today, but we are pretty much marginal in terms of numbers. But still, we can do a lot. I mean, trying to break into media and media narratives, and some of us do that quite regularly, in fact.
Then Veronica, yes?
Okay, okay. On the one hand, I find the term quite useful because it really describes the current political and social climate. I think it does that quite well, particularly in the context of, I mean, I probably came across and we all probably came across the term post-truth when we have studied populism and the way certain narratives have been somehow thrown up in the air and other narratives have been proposed. It is to a certain extent also a moniker because, I mean, because post-truth or non-truth or false narratives have always existed. The big difference, as I mentioned at some point in the presentation, is that with the current environment of social media, internet, digital environment, etc., these kind of messages are much quicker. They can be established and spread much more easily than in the past. There is, I believe that there is a general distrust or a more widespread distrust of authorities, whether they are social, cultural, or political authorities. So yes, there is that. I am not 100% sure that post-truth actually covers as a whole covers the term post-truth covers the complexity of what's going on. But it's let's take it as a useful term in this kind of transitionary period, so to speak.
Monica?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, what I find is that populist discourse uses, at certain junctures, uses conspiracies. So that's my other question that I should have explored a little bit more. So conspiracies are very often a means to an end, like given in the hands of certain political actors. So they are instrumental to a certain goal, to a certain target. So it's a kind of, in that sense, they're a kind of a sub-discourse, a kind of instrument that is used by populist discourse. But I do agree with you. I mean, the similarities between how conspiracy theories pose themselves and how populists pose themselves, is absolutely striking. So it's like, we are the oppressed, we are the marginal, we have the truth, everything is hidden from us. The terms that are used by conspiracists, the elite, the establishment, so they are exactly the same. And the true people, the oppressed people, they are exactly the same. So the kind of power dynamics behind conspiracy theories is the same as that of populism. The big advantage that conspiracy theories have for populists in that sense is that they can use as a trope within the context of certain narratives, and in fact, they have been used as a trope. I mean, the great displacement theory, maybe slightly worded in slightly different ways, is kind of one of the backbones of Trump's discourse. After all, with the whole rhetoric of the wall, it's a kind of a underlying presence. Okay.
There and then Maria Grazia, and then yes. Sorry, I'm trying to. No, back here. Yes. We can't hear you, sorry.
Oh yeah, yes, yes. Mm. Yes. Oh yes, by all means, yes. I mean, and this, I think this is probably one of the areas where like discourse analysis comes at hand quite significantly and quite usefully, because I mean, if we compare the way between official narratives are put in language and discourse versus conspiracy narratives, you have very often in official narratives you do have doubts, you don't have certainties, okay, as I would argue it should be. On the other hand, you have, even in the use of modality, you have a very strong certainties on the side of conspiracy narratives. So, oh, this is false, the truth is somewhere else. So the use of modality in conspiracy discourse is quite interesting in that sense, because they present everything as true. And of course, but I do agree with you that indeed, perhaps something better should be done from official narratives. I mean, the whole narrative about COVID in 2020, which was partly due to the fact that nobody really effectively knew what was going on, what was happening. As you know, sow the seeds of indeed conspiracy because, okay, what's happening? Okay, so we have an explanation from government, and then the next day we have a different explanation, we have a measure, and then another measure. And then the government tweets something, and then that tweet is deleted. Ah, there must be a conspiracy behind that. So I think in terms of language, the way official sources structure language and communication, I think that this is something that probably should be revised. But of course, no communication is totally perfect. But yes, but I do agree with you on that point. But of course, a lot has been done also by who believes in conspiracy theories. Okay, there are a lot of studies about that. You know, even in sociology, in psychology. Okay, so conspiracy. So when we say, oh, people believe in conspiracy theories, it's really some people who believe in conspiracy theories, and there are some. I mean, we all more or less have our own little empirical study that we have done of the friends or former friends who actually believe in conspiracy theories. And I don't know. Personally, I find a pattern. I mean, my two students had lost their jobs a few weeks before, for example. Okay, so, and this is part of the, can actually be framed within the populist idea. So the oppressed, the marginalized, you know, the kind of, you know, the people who are the, inverted commas, losers in society, or who perceive themselves as marginal and so on, are those who seem to be more exposed to conspiracy theories.
Ellie?
Yeah. 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 Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, this is what I asked myself when I was speaking to my students. You know, because I mean, of course, we are talking about two students out of several hundreds of students that I had in the last 20 years. But there may be other followers. So that's a good question, and I don't. I mean, each of us has. We all have our own set of rules. You know, on to how to try to develop a critical, healthy, skeptical even attitude towards discourse and towards reality. So I don't think there is a rule that we can kind of impose on each of us, on ourselves. But still, at the same time, I wonder. My first question was, you know, kind of, you know, lockdown, April 2020, everybody, you know, nobody could go outside. So what have I done wrong here? So, you know, this person is posting QAnon. I said, look, you know, this post can cause the death of some people. I said, oh, it's only 2 people who die. So who cares? I mean, this is the level of stuff that happens among the conspiracy theories. So I don't have a prescription or okay, we should do this, we should do better. And so on. I mean, we have not caused conspiracy theories, certainly.
I think I skipped Maria Grazia.
I was waiting for your question. In what groups, sorry? Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, of course, the idea of affinity group is one of the reasons why conspiracies are so widespread right now, and that's because I'm afraid of social media and internet. Because as you know, with social media there are echo chambers that are created, and therefore communities of people who more or less believe the same thing. They aggregate, so they kind of validate and legitimize each other, and so they create their own truth, so to speak. So other alternative explanations are just not accepted. But yes, there is there's definitely a style which is conspirational, and in terms of language, in terms of how argumentation is done. For example, rhetorical questions such as, okay, so is this the truth, and so on and so forth. So, but you'll find lots of these answers in the upcoming volume.
Was a question at the back? No? Okay. Quite a lot of questions.
So, Anna,
Marco, yes?
Marco. For me too, actually. So.
Working on language law. I got as my actions rather than that. Isn't it logical? Once we challenge one truth, we have to deal with the fact that there is no one truth. And that is a huge issue when cases has conditions of instability. Find assurance
Yes,
with
yes.
well-defined solution.
Exactly.
Whether there are solutions or not.
Yes.
But they are assured by God. That is probably our way acting with leaders.
Yes.
People can be assured because they are provided with words.
Yeah.
Being idealized, but so that is again very problematic. How do we, since you mentioned, have to deal with that? I agree. How do we deal with once we've accepted that the principle? And the other main problem that I've been thinking about last couple of is how to deal with people not on stage. Because that is the other real problematic issue. We understand them, we understand how their reasoning works, we accept that social established powers can be conflicted. How do we set up a dialogue with people who, my experience, personal and professional, are not interested in dialogue? So it's not really affecting the real answer. The question that we should tackle.
Well, yes, I mean, for one thing, thank you, Michael, for the question. But I think people who don't talk to each other, who don't understand each other, of course, have always existed. But of course, persuasion does exist. So we, otherwise we won't be in a society. At the same time, I agree with you. I mean, it's very, very difficult, particularly when you have strong convictions. And it is important to nourish doubt and to question, accept the truth. So this is what we do, and unfortunately or unfortunately, this is what conspiracy theorists also do. So, as you mentioned towards the end of your question, I mean, I don't have myself an answer to that, a definite answer to that, other than keep teaching and questioning assumptions or long-held assumptions. But it's difficult to say, oh, this is a lie, particularly coming from somebody who has always questioned official truths. And we always try to see, okay, what's behind, okay, words, what's behind language, what's behind the facade of official explanations. Okay, and so that's probably one paradox, okay, in which I found myself, and you find yourself, in fact.
Yeah, there was.
Oh, Anna has been raising her hand for a while. Exactly. Yeah. You mean well, of course these are our labels. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, but yes, it is. Yeah. Yes, okay. I'm going to answer it on two levels. Just like the label populism, the label conspiracist is also right now undergoing a revision, particularly from those who support it. At some point, I think it was one of a speech by Nigel Farage in which he said, "Yes, I'm populist because I am, look at the root of the word. I am on the side of the people." Okay, so populist for some has become a positive attribution. The same is slowly happening from conspiracy theories, because conspiracy theory is a term that we have invented for fictions, okay? So in a way, it is quite normative in that sense, because we decide what, in many respects, we decide that something has to cast aside, has to be put aside and cast aside because it makes no sense. Okay, the problem is that for those people, okay, who believe in that, it makes perfect sense. So and we go back to what Marco was saying before, because it's like two different worlds. It's like two giant echo chambers, okay, which basically don't communicate, and and each one othering the other, so to speak, and delegitimizing the other. Yes.
Paola?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. No. Exactly. Mm. 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 Yeah. Yes. Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. Also because, I mean, particularly with COVID conspiracy theories, I mean, they propose an alternative scientific discourse, which is well disguised as a scientific discourse. So we have the opinion of Dr. X or Dr. Y, etc. So even the discursive strategies that are employed are very well disguised, so they can be mistaken as official discourses or legitimate discourses.
I'm afraid we have to stop here, though this discussion is very interesting. We can go on with this discussion during coffee break, which is waiting for us in the same room as yesterday.
Okay.
Okay, so
Thank you. Thank you.